I think the American people have kind of hit the wall on the economy, on jobs, a generation that's basically stuck in unpayable student debt. And then you have two establishment candidates that people don't like and they don't trust. And the longer the campaign goes on, the more impatient people are with those candidates. And there is an incredible hunger out there for another voice. And I think people are discovering that there is another woman in the race. I'm a physician, not a politician. I don't come with a personal agenda. I'm not a professional politician. I'm a mother on fire, very concerned about where our younger generation is going, the future they don't have around debt, jobs, the climate crisis. And as a medical doctor, I'm sort of practicing political medicine because it's the mother of all illnesses, and we got to heal our sick political system so we can get down to all the other things that ail us. And I think there's a lot of people that feel that way, like the old politics is just melting down. I feel like my campaign in the Green Party has been ahead of the curve, and that curve has caught up to us on climate change, on student debt, on free public higher education, on health care as a human right, basically on an America and a world that works for all of us, because we're finding these wars for oil are blowing back at us. The war on terror only creates more terror. It's costing us half of our budget. About half of your income taxes are paying for these catastrophic failed wars that are not making us more safe. They're actually just fanning the flames of the next terrorist group. So people are feeling like we need change, and I am the one candidate that is not corrupted by lobbyist money, by the fossil fuel industry, by the banking industry, by the war profiteers. I don't have a super PAC. What you see is what you get. I'm just an activist citizen, really concerned about where we're going. And I think people see the old parties as kind of obsolete. The Republicans are coming apart at the seams, and the Democrats have kind of split in two. The Hillary Clinton piece is sort of merging with the old Republicans who are endorsing her campaign. And you have the Bernie Sanders and progressives who are distressed and dismayed and feel like the promises Hillary made because of Bernie, she's already turning around on, appointing a transition director, Ken Salazar, who is the guy, he's the fracking guy, he's the guy who supports the Trans-Pacific Partnership, who loved the Keystone Pipeline. I think people feel like this isn't the Democratic Party they signed up for and not something they can support. So this is a realignment election, and I'd say hold on to your hat, because what the American people are looking for now, in a majority numbers, the American people have rejected the Democratic and Republican candidates. So, we're kind of the alternative that people are looking for. The American people not only have a right to vote, we have a right to know who we can vote for, especially at a time when people reject the two candidates that are sitting right in front of our faces that only appear to be more corrupt and more objectionable the more we learn about them. Trump is the king of debt, he called himself. I love debt. $650 million worth of business debt now we're learning about. Not to mention that he sends his jobs overseas, even while he tells working America that he's the guy to save them. But, he's the guy who's been exploiting his workers, who's been cheating on students and sending his jobs away. So, I think people aren't so happy the more they learn about Donald Trump. The bottom line is people are really hungry for other choices. We did our first primetime TV last week. We were trending #1 on Twitter, showing how hungry people are for this. We're hoping to arrange more town hall forums with other primetime TV stations. We're beginning to be covered by the likes of PBS, and we're grateful for this interview. And it's remarkable that we actually got to 4, 5, even 6 and 7% without any mainstream media coverage. We're getting out there because it's word of mouth. It's a generation that's basically locked in debt And in fact, the 43 million people who are locked in debt, that is a winning plurality of the vote. That's the good news, that people who will come out and vote, because I'm the one candidate who will bail out the students like the establishment bailed out the crooks that crashed the economy on Wall Street. We're saying it's time to bail out the young people who are the victims of that crashed economy. If that word gets out, that's 43 million people who could win a three-way race right there just by coming out and essentially taking over this election for the future that they deserve. And that's why I think there is a fighting spirit right now of a lot of people who feel passionately that we need to make the debates an instrument of our democracy. Right now, the debates are an instrument of the Democratic and Republican parties. This great sounding name, this Commission on Presidential Debates, is not a public interest commission. It is a private corporation run by the Democratic and Republican parties for the purpose of silencing political opposition. This is not what democracy looks like. The League of Women Voters, who used to run the debates in a much more open fashion, when the Democrat and Republican parties took over, they quit, saying this is a fraud being perpetrated on the American public. And in fact, it is. The commission controls not only the candidates who get in, the moderators, and therefore the kinds of questions that get asked, they also control the audience that comes. So they can generate this mythology that people are actually supporting things like more wars for oil, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the corporate tax breaks, the kinds of things that the two parties have generally been supporting. So we intend to push for the kinds of open, inclusive debates. If we can't have an honest discussion now in a presidential election, when the majority of people are begging for it, and when we are facing really critical decisions about our future, because if you look at climate change, guess what? It didn't get better under Democrats, even with 2 Democratic houses of Congress. We got all of the above. That climate policy that's actually escalated the rate of rise of fossil fuels. It provided more renewables, that's great, but it took the lid off the production of fossil fuel energy. On the wars have continued, and they continue to expand. Or the war on immigrants. Trump says despicable things, but Hillary Clinton and the Democrats are the party of deportation, of detentions, and night raids. So we're saying forget the lesser evil, forget that fear campaign, stand up and fight, not for the lesser evil, but for the greater good. That's really what our lives depend on. And we need an open debate so we can really hold the parties accountable and hold these establishment politicians accountable. There are thousands of people who've signed up on our website, and I would encourage anyone who wants to have a real democratic debate. You know, we need to exercise our democracy if we're going to fix the crisis that we're in, of climate change, of war, of poverty, of a collapsing and stalled economy. We need to have real discussion. We need to engage our democracy. So there are thousands of people who've been signing up at Jill2016.com or at Dr. Jill Stein, and that's Jill Stein on our social media. People are signing up for our campaign for open debates. And I would say stay tuned. In the last race, my running mate and I were arrested simply for showing up. We were not just arrested, but we were taken to a dark site and tightly handcuffed to metal chairs for about 7 hours until everybody had gone home. This was just for trying to get into the campus where the debate was being held, where our intention was essentially to just be there and bear witness to a debate we should have been in. 85% of voters had a choice to vote for our campaign, but they were denied information about who we are as a campaign and as a party. So we're saying sign up and hold on to your hats, because there are thousands of people who are not going to take this sitting down.
So will it be a social media night? Will you be going Facebook Live and people will be, sharing what you have to say? What is there, something like that you're planning?
We're planning to actually be in the debates. We are planning for the democracy that we need if we are planning to have a climate that we're going to live in, if we are planning to have a foreign policy that's not blowing back at us with these wars on terror that keep creating more terror. We are planning on having an America and a world that works for all of us. In order to get to that stable and survivable future, we are planning on reviving our democracy, starting with open debates.
So even if you don't get into the first, will you continue to try and get into the others?
Absolutely, yes. And we have fought our way in the past. In elections at the state level, there were such intense and big protests at the debates that I was locked out of running for governor in 2002 that we were admitted into a debate. In that debate, which was in a TV studio, no live audience, my ideas went over like a lead balloon inside the TV studio, but when we walked out, I was mobbed by the press who told me I had won the debate on the instant online viewer poll. At that point, we were yanked out of the debate because the establishment realized that if word got out, I could actually win that race. We were taken out. We made the mistake of going to the court at that point, and the court basically shut it down. This time we are going to the court of public opinion so that we can continue to lift up the voices of everyday people who are clamoring for a job. We're calling for an emergency jobs program, a Green New Deal that will revive our economy at the same time that we tackle the crisis of climate change. We're offering real solutions. We're the only ones talking about the climate crisis right now and how we can fix it. We're the only ones talking about bailing out a generation of young people who have no future in the current economy. The jobs that have come back are lousy, low-wage, part-time, insecure jobs. They can't get out of debt. You know, the birth rate is plummeting in this country, which says something very serious. There's essentially a human rights disaster going on in this country. It's a generational disaster, a generation that's been locked out of a future, out of a family, out of the ability to have children, out of the ability to have a home that they can afford, and out of a job. This is the elephant in the room, and we're the only ones talking about it. We need to bring that into the debate. So we are just not going to take no for an answer here. And I don't just mean our campaign. I mean the American people who are being thrown under the bus, who've said that they reject the Democratic and Republican candidates. They are the most distrusted and most disliked of candidates in our history. So who is this private commission of the political parties that people reject? Who are they to tell people to just be good little boys and girls and keep voting for these two parties that have essentially deprived us of a future? I actually put out a message and a written open letter to Bernie Sanders to please consider joining me on our ticket and coming to the convention, that I would make the case for him, because it's the delegates who decides, not the candidates. So I couldn't say, here, take my place. But I could say, let's go to the convention, and if you actually saw the light about why we need independent politics, now that you've been shafted and sabotaged by the Democratic Party, maybe you have come to see why a revolutionary campaign needs a revolutionary political party. You cannot survive in a counter-revolutionary party. So my hope was maybe Bernie would learn something with this, but you know, he's a man of his word. He's a team player. I respect his position. I don't agree with it. I think he's on the wrong team. We made the effort, and I would still hold that out. You know, if at some point, you know, when he sees Hillary now moving to the right with Ken Salazar as her transition director, the guy who loves fracking and pipelines and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a betrayal of working people and the environment and our democratic sovereignty, for that matter. It's a corporate coup on steroids, NAFTA on steroids. Bernie may be seeing the light as the real Hillary stands up here. And you know, I would continue to hold out my, an olive branch here to say that let's collaborate in any way that we can. Come on over, come into our cabinet, be a key advisor, participate in the revolutionary movement that you have started and that your supporters are continuing. We are unstoppable. We have a lot in common in terms of domestic policy, fighting for an economy that works for working people, not just the billionaires and the bankers. We've got basically the same ideas here. We differ a little around foreign policy, where my campaign takes a principled position that we need a foreign policy based on international law, human rights, and diplomacy, not more of these regime change, wars for oil, wars on terror that have been such a catastrophe. The Democratic Party is kind of locked into that system, has a lot of funders from the war profiteers. As the only candidate that doesn't accept that money, corporate money, lobbyist money, etc., I can actually take a principled position here about what we need to do. So that's one area where we differ from Bernie. But so many of Bernie's supporters straddled both campaigns, and they were doing their best to bring us together. It's interesting because after the convention, there were many efforts to divert attention into concocted issues. Whether I'm a scientist or not, I'm a scientist, I'm a Harvard medical doctor, and I'm a published scientist and authority on children's health and the environment. And there was an effort to really distort that record and to drag me off topic on, shall we say, inconsequential manufactured problems. I think as things have settled out, we just held a press conference at the Washington Press Club, which was extremely focused, and I would, encourage people to go look at the C-SPAN tape of that video of that conference, which is on their website. And the major press was there. Politico was not, but a lot of the others were. We're being taken very seriously now. What I would say, if you want to critique campaigns, how about the money flowing into the coffers of the Clinton campaign and into the Clinton Foundation as favors were being handed out to Clinton Foundation donors? I think that's a serious problem that we ought to be critiquing, not whether there are some grassroots members of the party who don't have a polished and professional style. We pride ourselves on not being a professional party, actually, and on being open to the grassroots, the untutored grassroots, people who've never been political before, who are very upset about, about being locked out of society, future, jobs, climate, getting out of debt. There are many unpolished jewels in the rough in our party, and we're glad to have them, and we don't think that's really a subject for ridicule.
And in some ways, I think it isn't actually ridicule. It's actually saying that there's something there.
Yeah, I think it was a two-sided message. And if it's the article I'm thinking of, there actually was a little bit of ridicule, maybe not in that particular statement, but there was kind of a focus on small cosmetics in the convention, as opposed to the large cosmetics in the Democratic convention, where the DNC was caught red-handed, colluding against their own rules with Hillary Clinton's campaign. So political parties are fallible entities. The Green Party is a new party, and I completely agree with the sentiment that there is a lot here. Many people, and some of the biggest naysayers, are those who said, oh, you guys just run for president every 4 years and you disappear. The reality is that we are out there in the social movements, we are in the trenches, just like we were in the last 2 days, out there in Baton Rouge, in some of the most hard-hit communities, providing coverage to people who've been really missing in action here in the coverage of the racial disparities, the unequal recovery going on in Baton Rouge. We are a party of the grassroots, and we are a party of small office holders and candidates. And that is the reality. We are not just a party of presidential campaigns. We are a party of people who hold office at the level of school committee and city councils, and have held some state rep positions. The political climate, has been very closed. I think the Green Party really is about substance at all levels of the ballot. And in fact, what many people don't know is that in order to run at lower levels on the ballot, we have to run at the presidential level. We have to attain a certain percentage in the presidential race in order to actually be on the ballot. So it's the rules of engagement that actually require us to do this. But on this question of substance versus personality, we have a race now which seems to be almost entirely, well, it's certainly dominated by personalities, and it's personalities that people find, not very warm and fuzzy and not very appealing on both sides of the aisle. I think this isn't happening just by chance. We have a political system that's very dominated by big money. So you have candidates who are kind of locked into political positions that they are obliged to take in gratitude to their donors. They have to be locked into actually supporting a fossil fuel energy system. And that's true for both Hillary and for Donald Trump. They're both supporting the fossil fuel system that we have, and Hillary certainly did that as Secretary of State. So I think in a way they're trying to duck real substantive conversation. When was the last time Hillary gave a press conference? I just saw reported that it was 8 months ago that she gave a last press conference. Certainly they are few and far between. I think that's one of the reasons that people are showing up to our press conferences, is because it's such a novelty to actually have a candidate that believes in discussion. In my background as a medical doctor, I'm just aware that if we're going to heal what ails us, we have to be able to talk about it. I really see politics as a therapeutic process, and we all need political therapy right now. We have been traumatized and abused and taken advantage of. We are in an abusive political relationship right now, and I think it's very important for us to take stock of that and be able to stand up and walk away and get our lives back and our future back. In order to do so, we got to talk about what's actually really happening and how we can really solve it. The two major parties are paid not to talk about it.
You garnered the most votes by a woman in the general presidential election. How do you appeal to women?
I think by being a real woman, by standing up for the things that women care about, by nature, or whatever. Our lot seems to be caregivers. We are usually caregivers, and we are usually, not that men can't be caregivers, but we seem to be especially good at being caregivers, and whether it's for children or for our parents or for our communities. We just seem to be at the center of our communities. And by having an agenda that speaks to the needs of women, and I don't just mean equal wages, I mean equal wages that are out of poverty, not just a $12 an hour minimum wage, which is what Hillary supports. And Donald, I don't think it's even on his, it's not even on his radar screen to know what living wages mean. But Hillary stands for a low wage, not really a poverty wage. Being equal in poverty is not enough. In my view, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to really be a community and have a life that's going to work for all of us. And that means providing child care. It means providing parental and sick leave. It means the right to a job, the right to a good job. It means the right to free public higher education and to getting our young people out of debt. Not doing favors for Wall Street, which is too much of what we've seen. So we have one candidate, Donald Trump, who's a member of the billionaire club. But Hillary Clinton has been the advocate for the billionaire club, accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars from Goldman Sachs, for example. $153 million that the Clintons have earned in big, very big ticket private speeches to corporations that pay $200,000 a shot. So this is part of that cozy relationship that blurs the boundaries between an economic elite and a political elite. What we saw happen in the Secretary of State's office was a blurring of those boundaries with the favors that were done for the Clinton Foundation donors. As they were making donations, they were getting weapons contracts, they were getting public partnerships, they were getting good deals and special access in a way that I think violates most Americans' sense of propriety. We need a politics of integrity that that kind of blurring of the lines of private interests and the public interest does not belong in the president's office.